Hello Bio 112 students with Ms. Hook. This is Chapter 20, Communities and Ecosystems. First, we're going to talk about biodiversity, what biodiversity is and how human population can threaten it. In Chapter 18, we discussed ecosystems, and we're going to look at how the human population alters them with alien species, taking species out, disturbing them, taking out the ecosystem by degrading it, changing it to other things, and contaminating it. So you can see the human population in blue and the number of extinctions are highly correlated. They match up quite well. We discussed previously how important trees are to ecosystems, and that's part of biodiversity. So healthy ecosystems are very important. They are worth about $33 trillion. Why? Because they do all the things that an ecosystem should do. They help purify our air and water, they decompose waste, they recycle nutrients. They also, as we looked at before, help us keep water in the system, reduce soil immersion, and have everything functioning properly. For example, as wetlands, these can act as buffers, so they help protect the inland areas against hurricanes, they reduce flooding, and they filter pollutants. It's all important things to have happen. So what do we mean by biodiversity? Biodiversity is the most important thing. There are three parts. There's the genetic diversity of a single species, how many different alleles, versions there are in the species, and then there's species diversity, all the different species around, and ecosystem diversity, different ecosystems. We've already talked a lot about genetic diversity, especially how important it can be to be adaptable, and in a changing environment, it's very helpful. Now let's look at species diversity. Species are becoming extinct at a higher rate than we've seen in the last 100,000 years. Resulting, we could lose half of all the living plant and animal species by the end of the century, some before we even recognized that they were species. For example, different types of beetles in the rainforest. Throughout history, we've seen 5 large extinction periods, and this is turning into the 6th. If you look at these arrows, they're pointing to the mass extinctions that we've seen before, and oftentimes after these points you'll see these punctuated equilibriums of evolution where you'll have lots of evolution occurring to fill those different niches, the places that the extinct species occupied. And depending where you read, this half of all the species might even be conservative. I've seen even 3/4 of species will be lost in the next 200 years. So recent victims, Chinese river dolphin, golden toads. You can find a lot of species that have become extinct recently. You can look up, there are several articles out there of species that are likely to go extinct this year. It's really upsetting and depressing, and I think you get the point, so I'm not going to go any further there, but it's something that we should know is happening. At a higher level, you've got ecosystem diversity. So this is the different types of ecosystem, like deserts, rainforest, coral reefs, etc. And each of those performs different services and functions, as we discussed before. It's very important to have healthy ecosystems, and we pay for it much more than we realize when they are not healthy. Coral reefs, for example, they have high species diversity, lots of different species in one area, but they are being destroyed at high rates. There's the saying of the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, if you want to see it, you shouldn't go because it's not healthy for it, but it's going to be gone anyway, so you should just go while you can. Some of the issues that we have here, you've got coral bleaching. If you go to the NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, they have the National Ocean Service, you can learn about coral bleaching. So normally, coral is healthy, it has what's called these zooxanthellae. They have a symbiotic mutualism where they work together, and the zooxanthellae are these like algae, and they are healthy. But if the coral gets stressed, the algae leaves and then the coral turns white. And you can see the stresses over here. Change in ocean temperature, climate change, increasing the temperatures will cause the coral not to be able to function properly, pollution in several areas, and low tides. With that, the algae, the coral, can't properly get its nutrients. You also have human activities such as looking at it and touching it and harming it, taking it, to be an issue. The aquatic fish trade and other animal trade for aquariums is also really bad for coral reefs. People will take fish out at extremely high rates to sell to aquarium stores, and they'll take them out and assume that pretty much 90% of them are going to die before they get there, but then have enough that they can still make a profit off of. And they don't always look at in areas the population levels that they can healthily take out and still have a population. Okay, so we touched on a lot of these. Let's look at the causes of declining biodiversity: that habitat destruction, fragmentation, invasive species, overexploitation, and pollution. So first, invasive species. So an invasive means something that's not native. These are species that are introduced by us, and they affect the native species, the ones that are naturally there. So they can either compete with them for food, resources, reproducing areas, nests. They can prey upon the native species, and they can parasitize them. So over here, some aquatic examples. This is Asian carp. For example, Asian carp is now in the Mississippi, and they've actually killed people by jumping out of the water and knocking people off of their boats. These are zebra mussels. They're going through the Great Lakes and other lakes in the area. They outcompete the other mussels there and cause problems. And this is the dragonfish. So like in Florida, they're outcompeting other fish. They're taking over and they're using the resources. There you can take as many of these from the water as you want. There's no limit. They're happy to see those out of there. Another example would be like milfoil. It is a genus of aquatic plants that are often invasive. So in Minnesota, if you take your boat from lake to lake, you have to clean it off. Otherwise, you could spread milfoil, and the whole bottom of the lake in less deep areas will be covered in plants that go all the way almost to the top of the water. More invasive species. Australia has some pretty interesting ones because they have marsupials. Introduced mammals can be very successful. For example, rabbits. There's over 200 million there now. And this is the cane toad. They'll often trap these as a way to get rid of them in Australia. And here we've got cats. This is my cat, and I love him to death. But cats are what are called mesopredators. So meso kind of in the middle. And they feed on smaller creatures, but they could have bigger predators like coyotes, wolves, bears, etc. But because we don't have a lot of those higher predators, these guys can explode and take out far more of those smaller species than should be taken out. Outdoor cats, for example, kill millions of songbirds every year and over 1 billion birds each year. What can we do to decrease this number? You can have your cat with a collar that has a bell on it, for example, but make sure that it's not too tight. If the cat gets caught in something, it can get the collar out and not choke. And some people say, oh, you can let them out only at night. Well, cats can go to the birds' nests as well, so that doesn't really work well. Trying to keep your cat in a more local area can help, for sure. But if you want to have your cat be outdoors, the collar with the bell is the best bet. Here we have a Burmese python from Florida. People get these animals as pets, and then they decide they don't want them anymore and they just let them go. Not what you should do. You should never take your pet fish or any other pets and release them into the wild. Even turtles, once you've had them in an aquarium, shouldn't be brought back to the wild. You shouldn't take those out. But these then can get into houses and into lots of trouble. However, in colder environments, they can't survive winters, so they're generally a problem more in the south. Two other examples. Here we have killer bees. These bees are very similar to ours, except they're far more defensive. And you can see how far they've gone up in California now. They attack much more strongly. They have lots more stings because there are more stinging you. And people with allergies can be killed by them, or if you just get too many total. And last right here we have a starling. So starlings are originally from Europe, and they came to the US because some group wanted to bring in all the birds ever mentioned in Shakespeare. So they released them in New York in Central Park. And from those about 100 birds, we now have over 200 million. And they've spread, they're in Australia as well. They're from both sides of the coast, even in Alaska. And they compete with other species, purple martins, for example. And these ones are ones that if you see them, you can shoot them as much as you want. You don't need any sort of permit to do so at all. They compete for housing with purple martins. These are purple martins, and these are these gourd housings that they have. We have a couple in our backyard and have successfully raised a couple of broods, which is very exciting. But what you need to do if you get purple martin housing is it needs to be just the right size, like a 1/16 of an inch difference, and the purple martins and starlings can fit in, and then the starlings will take over. But if it's slightly smaller, the starlings can't fit in, and then it's purple martin housing. Their whole population basically now is reliant on people putting out houses for them, and there are places that have thousands of houses. It's a really interesting thing to do. You just have to make sure that you have about 40 feet around where that's the highest point, and like we have it on a pole so that then this isn't ours. You have to make sure that you have something to keep snakes from coming up it. It's a really neat thing to do. So that was the first way that ecosystems can be upset. The next is overexploitation. So that's taking wildlife at a rate higher than the population can rebound. So that's like coral reef fish that I was talking about. Other examples, tigers for their fur, American bison overhunted for their meat, and so that Native Americans couldn't eat them. Galapagos tortoises, they have such a long generation time, reproduce slowly, that you can't take them very fast at all. Two more examples that are really high right now, rhinos and elephants. Rhinos, their horn is taken for Asian medicine that it doesn't work like that, and elephants for their tusks. Each year we kill a lot of animals. Even in South Africa, which is highly developed for Africa, you're seeing this huge increase at a very high rate that the rhino population cannot keep going through before they become extinct very soon. And people do this because there's others willing to pay a lot of money for it. So the best way that we can bring it down is education and support of those national parks that try to protect them. Another issue for these species is that their land that they used to move between, migrate around, has been significantly decreased into these national parks, and so they can't migrate as far, and they don't have the space to have the populations be sustained properly. And next, pollution. You've got pollution, oil spills, fracking that hurt the ecosystems. In Chapter 18, we briefly discussed community ecology, and I'll get more into that in our next part of this video.